Good evening. I recently passed the 200,000 subscriber mark and, per YouTube tradition, I thought I'd do one of those Q&A type videos that are so popular. Well, actually it's a little over 203,000 at the time of recording this, because I passed 200,000 while I was wrapped up in other projects. So I turned to my good friends on Patreon, and here is what they asked. Would you like it if TfL arranged a cab ride on an underground train for you? Yes, absolutely, that would be amazing. In general, I'm a fan of any opportunity to get an unusual view of whatever it is I'm talking about. One of the things I aim for in my videos is to give viewers something they can't easily get elsewhere, and unusual footage is part of that. How difficult is it not to appear in your own videos? It's surprisingly hard. There are many reflective surfaces on the transport network, especially on something like the Elizabeth line or the Jubilee line. But I've got a lot better at identifying angles at which I can't be seen over the years. There is the occasional slip, but usually I get away with it. That being said, I've had instances where people in the comments section thought they spotted me, but it was actually someone else. Sometimes I correct them, and sometimes I don't. Some people just want to see the world burn. Relating to that, did you enjoy getting in front of the camera in the Jay Foreman vid? Ah yes, so last year I was in a couple of videos on Jay Foreman's channel, in which I played Harry Beck, the designer of the tube map. Now, I must admit that when Jay approached me, I was a little hesitant about appearing on camera, but then I thought it might be fun to appear in person on someone else's channel. Actually, there are several YouTube videos where I appear in front of the camera, but most of them date from before my channel existed. There's a music video, there are a few related to theatre productions that I've been involved in, and of course there are accidental cameos in other people's transport videos. I was also on ITV News a couple of months back with my face in full view, which I'm sure was very upsetting to people trying to have their tea. Jay's video was a lot of fun to work on. His setup is way more professional than mine. Like, he has a camera crew and directions in the script and everything. And I got to meet lots of cool people while working on it. All in all, a splendid experience. If you're not familiar with his work, and you probably are, admittedly, but if you're not, you really should be. His stuff is way slicker than mine and absolutely crammed with information. What has been your most surprising historical discovery about London transport while making these videos? So many. I mean, when I started out, I thought I knew a fair bit about the Underground, but I feel now like I knew nothing. I mean, I've encountered people online who think I still know nothing, but let's ignore them for now. I guess if I were to pick one, the one I find myself bringing up a lot is how far back the Elizabeth line goes. Like, you can trace its evolution all the way back to the 1940s in the County of London plan. If you go all the way back to when the need for it was identified, the concept was conceived in the 1930s. Although I was talking to another well-known transport content creator the other day, who said that the concept first came about in the 1880s, and I really need to ask him about that. What's your favourite line on Chicago's L? Let's say the purple line. I will not be elaborating further. Did London fundamentally inherit a world-class transport system because Victorian investors were fundamentally misguided in how profitable they thought railways would be? Now that's an interesting one. And I would say, yes, absolutely. But I would say that the same thing applies to the entire British railway network. I would also say, though, that there were a fair few people who were willing to fundamentally misguide people in the hope of squeezing money out of them. Basically, in the 19th century, there seems to have been this unwillingness for the government to interfere in railways, which was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, we got hundreds and hundreds of miles of railways, many of which later got closed down. On the other, it meant that investors were very vulnerable to con artists, and I've talked about a few of them on this channel. Charles Tyson Yerkes for one, George Hudson for another. I never get tired of those two. If you could invest £1 in any Victorian Railway scheme, what would it be? That's a tricky one. Well, the obvious choice would be something like the North Eastern Railway, the Great Western Railway, or the London and North Western Railway. These were big companies and very wealthy. They had access to a lot of heavy goods traffic and industrial centres. But let's say it's the 1840s. I don't have the benefit of hindsight, but I do have a reasonable knowledge of what makes a railway successful. I would invest in the North Staffordshire Railway, of which I have very little footage. It's a small undertaking compared to the others I mentioned, but like the others, it serves a major industrial area, and it carries a lot of coal. It also has good connections to other major companies, and it's on the direct route from London to Manchester. Now, admittedly, I am biased because the North Staffs was the company my great-granddad started out on, but it's a company that I like more and more the more I learn about it. It's also one of the few railways to get a musical written about it, but that's another story. How do you manage to always have the correct footage for what you are discussing in the moment? Now, there are two ways of doing this, and I have looked at the subject a little bit in previous videos. Sometimes it involves going out and getting the footage, so I'll read up on the place or the thing I'm talking about, and I'll know that such and such an item of interest is there, so I know what to look out for when I go filming. When I'm filming, I try to explore the place thoroughly and try to look at things, shall we say, fairly intensely, to try to spot those odd little things that might not be too obvious to somebody who uses the station every day. The other way is to have an archive. I get a lot of my footage on spec. I film using a phone, which means that if I see anything unusual that I'm not expecting to see, I get a shot of it and file it away in case I can use it in a future video. Sometimes I do journeys on spec. I go to a railway or a museum or something, and I take footage there in case I can use it in the future. For instance, a lot of the footage in this video comes from a recent visit to the Railway Museum at York. I have no immediate use for this footage of Box Hill, but I can think of several circumstances under which it would be useful. I don't organise things in any fancy or particularly logical way. I just store my footage by name and hope I can remember it when it comes to making another video. In your opinion, what is the most underappreciated place in London? See, that's a hard question to ask in the age of social media because there's so many news outlets and forums and subreddits and things talking about London. It's kind of hard to find any hidden gems, as it were. So I'm going to say something a bit odd, and that is the City of London. Now, I know what you're thinking. Everyone knows the City of London. Millions of people enter it every day. But there's just so much to it. Every street is brimming with history. You can find oddities down every back street or alleyway. There's cutting-edge modern architecture and there's Roman ruins and everything in between. Even if you think you appreciate the city, you could probably stand to appreciate it more. As someone who often boarded a Met Line train at Amersham, I was aware that the line once went off into the wilds of Buckinghamshire. Any chance of a video on that history and something of the present-day situation with that line? Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I've recently been collecting footage at Aylesbury and Wendover, and I really need to get down to Quainton Road at some point too. Basically, as the question says, before the Metropolitan was officially an underground line, it sort of splayed off into the countryside in the hope of being able to get to places like Oxford and Manchester. It didn't succeed, but it did mean that for a long time the Metropolitan line served a lot of places that really were not within the remit of London transport. It's a subject that fascinates me. What are your top 10 favourite underground stations? Please do a countdown video. Actually, I do often get people asking what my favourite underground station is, and I think I give a different answer every time. I have to say that working on this channel has given me a lot of appreciation for stations I just didn't have before. So you know what, maybe the subject does deserve a video. Well, that's just about all the questions. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do hit the like button and consider joining the 203,000 or so other subscribers. I would like to thank my donors on Ko-fi and Patreon and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the North Staffordshire Railway to my route to Manchester. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.